In popular media, the American Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA as it's widely known, is often depicted as a nexus of bizarre and inhumane experimentation, an organization in which unshackled mad scientists ply their trade with shockingly little oversight and apparently bottomless budgets. Think American Dad or Stranger Things, and well, you've got the idea. Are you ready for some epic battles and world domination? Because I've got something exciting to share with you today. It's today's sponsor, Conflict of Nations, a free online PvP strategy game. Conflict of Nations lets you choose a real country and lead it in a modern global war. You'll be fighting up against 128 other players in real-time battles that can last for weeks. It's a game of strategy, alliances, and tactical brilliance. Build your army with an array of powerful units like tanks, jets, and even nuclear submarines. Declare war on your neighbors or forge alliances with other players. The choice is yours and the world is your playground. One thing I love about Conflict of Nations is the long-term strategy that it requires. You need to plan your moves carefully, engage in epic battles, and watch as your empire grows. It's like playing chess on a global scale. But there's more. You can play Conflict of Nations on your PC and mobile devices, which means you can dominate the world wherever you go. And here's the best part. Conflict of Nations is offering you an exclusive gift. Just click the link in the description below. You get 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. But remember, this offer is only available for 30 days, so don't miss out. What are you waiting for? Join me in Conflict of Nations, choose your country, and fight for victory. And now back to today's video. You might find yourself chuckling at the absurd stories presented in these shows because, well, they're just silly fiction, right? I mean, surely reality can't be as outlandishly bizarre as these fictional tales. Well, hold on to your tinfoil hat, folks, because while those stories certainly crank up the absurdity to 11 for maximum entertainment factor, they are much closer to the truth than you might initially imagine. And today we're going to be demonstrating this point by showing you 5 of the CIA's most Machiavellian, unethical, and downright bizarre real-life operations. In the volatile climate of the 1960s, a tiny island nation just a stone's throw away from the coast of Florida had committed the ultimate offense in the eyes of the CIA. Cuba, under the charismatic sway of Fidel Castro, had dared to leave the United States as hegemon and hoist the red banner of communism. Naturally, the CIA, who bled red, white, and blue, weren't exactly pleased by this development, and so their strategic planners got to work with a single aim in mind: to subvert this seismic shift and reinstate what they believed to be the correct economic system on Cuba, and in the process place it firmly back under Uncle Sam's boot. But, well, how to do such a thing? Many devious strategies were drafted, and among the multitude of sinister schemes, a particularly chilling idea eventually came to the fore, and that was war. However, they had to tread very carefully. They couldn't just attack out of the blue. It had to appear justified to the international community, lest Cuba's new friend, the Soviet Union, come to its defense. This presented a bit of a problem. Despite already having faced numerous provocations, such as repeated assassination attempts on its leadership and a failed US-backed coup by Cuban exiles, Cuba wasn't actually doing anything of note to the US, certainly not enough to justify a little regime-changing military excursion. So then the CIA decided that if Cuba wouldn't play ball and attack them, they'd just stage it. Operation Northwards officially launched in 1962 and was tasked with carrying out these false flag attacks. A range of options were planned out, from downing and hijacking airliners to sinking both civilian and military ships. And so, what was the cherry on this most macabre of cakes? Well, mass shootings in key American cities, all of which would be blamed squarely on Cuba. The most shocking part of Operation Northwards was its scale. This wasn't some harebrained idea penned on the back pages of a tattered old notebook by some junior intern or agents. This idea went right from the bottom to the top of the CIA, with hundreds of agents of all ranks and seniorities seeing the plan, thinking it was a thoroughly cracking idea, and signing off on it. It progressed so far that it found itself only a pen stroke away from being implemented, but fortunately that pen was President John F. Kennedy's, a man who was no stranger to authorizing some shady stuff in regards to Cuba, but fortunately he drew the line at the ritualistic slaughter of his own citizens on behalf of the US hegemon. The plan, several inches thick after just over a year of work, found its way to his desk in 1963, just before his assassination. Unfortunately, he was utterly repulsed by what he read and firmly refused to authorize the plan or any others like it. But this didn't stop the CIA from planning, as they carried on working on the plan in secret, eventually bringing it to the desk of Kennedy's successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, in 1964. Fortunately, he proved just as opposed to slaughtering his own citizens as his predecessor, and so the operation was formally cancelled that same year. The plans then sat gathering dust in a CIA archive until they eventually came to light several decades later in 1997, having been found buried deep within 1,521 pages of 1960s military records that were declassified by the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board. The now uncovered story of Operation Northwards generated some limited anger as word of it disseminated around America, but with most of the key players in the story being long dead by that time, nothing ultimately came of this anger. So, you probably realized during that previous chapter that the CIA weren't exactly Fidel Castro fans, and from that you're probably able to deduce that they were quite keen to see him assassinated. But what you probably didn't expect was for them to have a whopping, wait for it, 634 attempts at it. Naturally then, having so many goes at it, a few of them were bound to be a little bit weird, and here are some of the weirdest. Our first scheme takes us to the year 1960. Fidel Castro's just come to power, and on account of all of that socialism that he was so famous for, the CIA wasn't taking the news very well. In response, they hatched a plan to lace a box of his favorite cigars with a potent botulinum toxin. One puff, and he's a dead man. They quickly deduced his favorite brands from the many publicly released photos of him smoking. They secured a box, laced it with the deadly toxin, and had an agent secret it in his office. But for some reason, this deadly ruse just didn't work. He kept on appearing in public, he kept on smoking the same brand of cigars, all very much alive. Eventually, the plan was deemed to have failed. There are also reports that the cigar was intended to explode, but we haven't been able to confirm that one. The next weird scheme to kill Castro involved exploiting his love for scuba diving. The plan to conceal explosives in a large seashell that they painted sufficiently vibrantly to be absolutely irresistible to the ocean-loving communist. The plan was ultimately abandoned because, would you believe it was deemed to be just a tad bit ridiculous. But that was not the end of the scuba-related plots. In 1963, the agency schemed to infect one of Castro's diving suits with a fungus designed to cause a severe skin disease. The suit, along with an infected breathing apparatus, were to be delivered to Castro by American lawyer James Donovan. This one sounds a bit more sensible, right? So, how could this go wrong? Did the warm waters of Cuba kill the fungus and thwart their dastardly plan? Did Castro have a mole in the CIA that tipped him off? No, Donovan just accidentally gave him the wrong suit. Another scheme saw the CIA plan to kill Castro with a poison pen. At great expense to the US taxpayer, the CIA constructed a special pen with a hypodermic needle rigged inside of it. As soon as someone wrote with the pen, the needle would jump out, prick deadly poison into the user, and kill them. A genius plan, if there ever was one, certainly, but, well, not in the ideas of the Cuban collaborator chosen to deliver it to Castro. He thought the whole plan was ridiculous, and he threw the pen in the bin. The CIA also hatched several schemes intended not to assassinate the man, but rather his public image. A notable example involved lacing Castro's broadcast studio with LSD. The idea was to disorientate Castro during a particularly important speech, making him look utterly ridiculous, which would somehow spark a counter-revolution and return Cuba to the embrace of Uncle Sam. When this didn't work, the CIA looked at lacing his cigars with LSD to achieve the same effect and sprinkling thallium salts on his shoes to make his signature beard fall out. None of these ridiculous schemes worked. Castro proved to be something of a Teflon president, as not a single assassination plot, harebrained or not, managed to stick. And remember, there were over 600 of them. He went on to live till 2016, dying at the ripe old age of 90, outliving many of the people who once strived to end his life. It wasn't just Cuba which became a target of the CIA's regime-changing efforts during the Cold War. All across Latin America, any nation which threatened the US hegemon by drifting too far to the left found itself in the agency's crosshairs. One such example is Guatemala, with the efforts to return it to the correct sphere of influence being dubbed Operation PB Success. Guatemala's great affront to the CIA was electing Jacobo Arbenz in 1950. He was a leader who came to power on a platform of land reform, labor rights, infrastructure investments, and education. I mean, God forbid. As far as many in the CIA were concerned, such a ludicrous platform was already tantamount to a soft October revolution. But what they really found egregious was that first promise: land reform. You see, in this period, Guatemala was an American colony in all but name, with the United Fruit Company, now Chiquita, all but controlling the country, completely dominating the nation's most lucrative industry, paying the local workers a pittance and, well, treating them like garbage. Land reform was intended to change this state of affairs, but the notion that an American company might have to actually, reduce its profits in order to treat its workers in the developing world like human beings was the last straw for the CIA. Our ends had to go, and so US President Dwight Eisenhower formally authorized this operation in August 1953. The plan was simple. A campaign of propaganda and psychological warfare would weaken the country's will, then a conventional military invasion would swoop in and remove Arbenz from power. The propaganda campaign painted the Guatemalan leader as a puppet of the Soviet Union, one who threatened the delicate balance of power in the Western Hemisphere. The psychological warfare consisted of radio broadcasts being infiltrated with messages aimed at sowing ill will, undermining the government's authority, and instilling a sense of impending doom. And just to further ensure success, infiltrators were planted within the ranks of the Guatemalan government to feed information to the CIA, while military equipment was amassed for the impending invasion. The military components of the operation came in the form of Carlos Castilla Armas, a Guatemalan army colonel handpicked by the CIA. Assembling an invasion force of 480 men, Armas and his force stood ready to invade Guatemala, with the green light for the invasion being given in June 1954. The invasion went remarkably well, thanks to the aforementioned supporting campaigns. The Guatemalan army flatly refused to fight, fearing that Armas's attack was just the opening stage of a full-scale US invasion. This made the outcome inevitable, and Arbenz was forced to abdicate on the 27th of June. As far as the CIA was concerned, the operation was a roaring success. The United Fruit Company had kept control of its economic colony, and the taxable dividends would keep flowing into Washington. But for the people of Guatemala, the operation was nothing short of disastrous. The lucky ones remained under the boot of the United Fruit Company, and the unlucky ones found themselves among the 200,000 casualties of the 36-year-long civil war that broke out in the country in 1960 as a direct result of the CIA's destabilization of it. The year's 1953, and the Cold War's icy grip is squeezing the globe. Amid this shimmering geopolitical tension, the CIA launches Project MKUltra. The objective? To develop mind-controlling techniques that could turn individuals into compliant puppets and bend enemy minds to the American will. It was a most comprehensive program, with a broad range of disturbing experiments falling under its remit, including hypnosis, electroconvulsive therapy, isolation, and sensory deprivation. But it was a drug that played the starring role in this sinister saga. This was lysergic acid diethylamide, better known as LSD. The CIA had its eyes set on LSD as a potential truth serum, hoping that it would crack open the human mind and make it pliable for manipulation. Unconcerned with, trifling matters like consent and ethics, the agency drugged countless unsuspecting people. From soldiers and government agents to sex workers and mental patients, no one was safe from the invisible tentacles of MKUltra. To exemplify the true horror of the program, let's focus on Subproject 68, which was run out of the Allen Memorial Psychiatric Institute in Canada under the direction of psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron. Here, patients who sought treatment for minor mental health issues found themselves trapped in a real-life horror show. They were subjected to psychic driving, repeated audio messages played for hours, combined with drug-induced sleep for days or even weeks. This brutal method aimed to erase their existing memories and implant new ones, a nefarious form of brainwashing. And of course, if any of the poor patients ever tried to tell the outside world of their torture, well, they were just crazy, weren't they? No need to listen to a word they say. Then there was the Midnight Climax operations, another dark chapter in the MKUltra story. For these operations, the CIA set up brothels in San Francisco and used them to lure unsuspecting men for non-consensual drug experiments. The men were then drugged by these sex workers and observed by agents who were watching the whole thing behind one-way mirrors. Despite the unfathomable scale and severity of these experiments, the grisliest aspect of MKUltra was just perhaps its lack of oversight. The project's directors brazenly disregarded basic human rights and used the pretext of national security to escape any and all reprimand for their truly inhumane experiments. Not that the CIA's directors would have cared, even if they didn't have this flimsy blag. They were just as invested in the program's success as their agents, and if a few innocent people had to get hurt along the way, well then so be it. This chilling tale remained hidden for many years, buried deep under layers and layers of bureaucratic red tape. But it did eventually come to the public's attention in 1975 when the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission peeled back the layers of secrecy and shined light on this dark tale. Well, partially anyway, as most of the project's documents were ordered destroyed in 1973 by then CIA Director Richard Helms. This calculated move veils many details of the project in an impenetrable fog of mystery, and consequently, it is likely we'll never know the full story of the horrific atrocities carried out in the name of MKUltra. Now let's finish today's episode with something a bit more firmly on the weird side of the weird to evil scale. The story starts in the early 1970s when the CIA caught wind of rumors suggesting that the Soviets were pouring an astonishing 60 million rubles every single year into research on extrasensory perception and mind reading. These rumors were received with great alarm, prompting the CIA to create their own equivalent program, Project Stargate. Their focus was ambitious and, frankly, unprecedented. They aimed to explore and potentially harness psychic phenomena such as telepathy, precognition, and remote viewing, which is an ability to perceive distant or unseen targets using the mind alone. Testing began in earnest in 1972 at the Stanford Research Institute in California. The operation was led by physicists Russell Targ and Harold Perthoff, who initiated the first trials with individuals believed to possess psychic gifts. Among them was Uri Geller. Yes, that Uri Geller, who stood out for his purported abilities. His performance in a series of tests appeared to verify his paranormal skills, somehow sparking a significant interest from the US Department of Defense. However, this initial success was not without its pitfalls. Geller's skills came under scrutiny when an independent evaluation by Ray Hyman, a psychology professor, deemed him to be a fraud. Despite the setback, the CIA remained committed to the notion that psychic abilities could be harnessed for espionage. As the 1970s progressed, the project, renamed Operation Grill Flame, was relocated to the US Army's Fort Meade in Maryland. The project began to show promise when a remote viewer named Rosemary Smith accurately located a crashed Soviet plane in the Congo using just a map. This accomplishment bolstered the project's credibility. Further enhancing its reputation was the work of Army veteran Joseph McMoneagle, or Remote Viewer Number 1 as he was known during testing. He conducted numerous missions, including a particularly unusual one in 1984, where he claimed to have psychically traveled to Mars and described seeing giant beings and pyramids. Oh, and he was also a time traveler, apparently too, having supposedly traveled back to the year 1 million BC, and we really should stress the word supposedly there. But here's the real twist. What if we told you that this project wasn't quite as absurd as it might first sound, and that actually it was all completely legit and as claimed, and that the CIA actually uncovered genuine, real proof for the eclectic array of mental powers it was investigating?
That sounds like bullshit.
Well, no, I mean, of course, that didn't happen. The program was eventually comprehensively reviewed, and it was found that not one single shred of evidence had been uncovered for the existence of those powers. A world-shattering conclusion, truly. The real shocking thing, however, was that this review didn't happen until 1995, 23 years after the project started. So how did it take the CIA 23 years to conclude that human beings don't have magic powers? But you know what? After today's video, we're not even mad. We'll take wasting time investigating magic powers over a botched coup any day of the week. Thanks for watching. Just before you go, please do remember to check out today's fantastic sponsor, Conflict of Nations. If you're a fan of thrilling PvP strategy games set in the modern world of warfare, then this is a must-play for you. Click the link in the description to get that 13,000 gold as a bonus, as well as the 1-month premium subscription for free. But hurry, the offer's only available for 30 days, and I'll see you next time.